I'd always try and look, and certainly do now, even with first team players as well, look at yourself first and see what's happening in the session. And are the challenges high enough for them in the session? Because a lot of the times I've just found that when the players are what's perceived as misbehaving is because they're not doing enough in the session, or the session's not quick enough for them, or there's too much talking, or they're not getting challenged enough in there. So I thought that was something I worked out pretty early, but something that I've always tried to stick to.
Yeah,
I think is what are you doing yourself in that? I think if you look at yourself as the coach or the session first, go, well, why is he doing that? Well, he doesn't have he might need a little target in there that's different to the other players. They're fine, but he might need a bit extra.
I think.
Do you know what I mean? Can you get to 3 goals, or can you do this? How many times can you turn on the half turn and play forward? If you get to 5, I'll give you a point, type thing. And that way, he might go, oh yeah, he might need that. The other players don't, but he might need that himself. So I think that's probably an interesting one. And I think sometimes younger players, we all know, it's a bit of an act, isn't it? Sometimes. So maybe some players you might have to nail them early in the session and go, well, look, if you do that again, you won't play in this session, and then see how that goes. And others might need a little arm around. Look, I remember one time at Southampton, there was big on like timekeeping and things like that, like you always are in all academies. And there was this one kid who I was quite new to the age group, and he must have got there at 8:05, I think, in the morning to go to an away game. And me being the coach, I thought, I'm going to get him. It's 8:05. He's late. We'll let him know. And it was only under 14s, but I was still learning at the time. And I told him off and put him on the bus. And he was, got on the bus. And then I managed to talk to him later on. And I found out where he'd come from. And he'd come all the way from like Portsmouth that morning. He had no real parental support to get him there. He got there himself on a bus. The train wasn't working, so he caught 2 buses. Then he walked half an hour. And he left at some silly time, like 4 or 5 a.m. I can't remember exactly what it was. And I'm telling him off for being 5 minutes late. Yeah. Whereas everyone else has turned up with their parents in their cars, probably their nice cars, dropped them off. And he's done all that to get there on time just for a game on a Sunday. And that taught me a huge lesson at the time. I was like, well, make sure you know, 1, about your players, first of all, and 2, what they've had to go through to get there. So he might have been 5 minutes late, but boy, did he put in the yards. And from that moment on, I knew he was going to do well, and he did quite well, and I think he went out to America and got a scholarship and did quite well. But that was a good lesson for me, because I could go, oh, he's late, he doesn't care, he doesn't want to be a footballer, whereas he's done twice as much more,
which I think
than any other player. And I went, but if I don't learn from that, there's something wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Which I think is important. I mean, there's loads of things that are sticking out for me in regards to that, in terms of knowing your children and what's going on for them, in terms of them as a child or as a person. But yeah, it's we forget those little things as well. Sometimes we get caught in I don't know, the football world, where it's all about the football, and we often know that in regards to where these young people may end up, often is a case where it might not be football. That conversation, in regards to the conversation, probably supported that person a hell of a lot, just understanding, you know what, someone's taking the time to actually acknowledge the fact that I left at 5 a.m. in the morning, took me 3 hours to get here, and it probably, I know I got in a little bit of trouble, but actually they've acknowledged the fact that what I've done to get here is probably hell of above any sort of thing that that other young people have done. So really interesting. You kind of lent on in terms of your experience in youth development, and we talked to some of the people that have been on the show, that whole process of being in and out of academy and what that looks like, and sort of the whole retain and release process. What was your involvement in that?
Yeah, I mean, when I first went into Southampton as under 14s coach, and then, like we said, went to the 13 to 16 lead phase coach. So it was always a big decision at the end of the under 14s year at that time, because that was 2012, 2013, and it was quite a big cutoff because you didn't have a 15s games program, whereas now the 15s games program is a lot more available. So you wouldn't take as many under 14s because the better 15s would play in the 16s, and you'd only take 1 or 2 of the other 15s who weren't ready for that, which really isn't right when you think about it, because you could have some late developers in the 15s that you might miss out on. That was a hard process. I think Southampton taught me a lot with that there was a lot of people involved in that process, which was good. So you'd have the recruitment people inputting, you'd have the coaches who'd work with the players inputting, we'd have recruitment meetings with S&C coaches, with physios, with the head of education as well. And I thought that was good that everybody was involved and it was a real informed decision, because I think if you just leave it to one coach, to make the decision. There could be mistakes happening with players, and we'd make mistakes. Do you know what I mean? Some players got through the system, but I think it was quite a good way of doing it, that everybody would be involved. Around that under 16 time as well, or during that time, it was my job to tell the players and their parents when they weren't getting offered another contract.
And how was that for you?
That was the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Getting rid of a first team player is so much easier, because around that 14s, 15s age group is the hardest, because they're old enough to understand what's going on, but still young enough to take it emotionally. And you see them like 4 or 5 times a week. Now cutting a first team player is easy because they know that that's the business they're in. We know as coaches and managers, hired and fired.
And the younger
but
ages,
the younger ages is hard. It's the
do we
worst.
do enough? Do we do enough for the younger ages?
I think from what I've seen, there's a lot of good work being done with it, and it is going to be upsetting. It is going to be hard. I think it's more about what you do after that. So we would have that meeting, and it would be a terrible meeting. You'd be telling the kid that they wouldn't make it. I think that it should never be a shock to a player. And that took me a few years to work out how to do that. I think with the previous meeting, 6 weeks, 12 weeks before that, we need to be doing these things if you're going to get that contract. And then 6 weeks before that, well, you still need to do these things. So I think it should never be a shock, but it's never easy either. I mean, the parents sacrifice so much. The kids are sacrificed so much. They might be supporting that club as well, so it means even more to them. But I think once you have that meeting, it's what you do after. What route do they want to go down? Do they want to follow the American college route? You need to help them and get them in touch with the right people for that. We used to put together a good video at Southampton and West Ham as well with the contacts that they had. West Ham were quite good at that because they would set up the players to be able to go to other clubs if they wanted to, and they were very good at that. And a lot of that was done by the recruitment team. They were very good at that too. So I think supporting that player, I've had some terrible meetings when you originally do that. But then if you do the work afterwards, because you care about the player, I think that's the most important bit. And support them in whatever route they want to go down.
And is there anything, I mean, I listened to, you just talked about West Ham helping them get into different clubs. Is there anything else you feel that sometimes you think we could have done that a bit better, or that if I was a young person, yourselves, you think, could we have just given them that? Is there something?
I think I've been fortunate with the 2 clubs I've been at during that time that they have done that quite well. I think just giving them that personal care and attention and knowing exactly what they want to do after that. Some of those players just want to go back and play grassroots football. So how do you support them with that? I think making sure we've sort of said it a few times, but what the individual needs, I think is probably the most important bit with that.
Definitely. So all right. So now, I listened to this before in regards to your transition from kind of a development environment to you're now going to a first team. Winning means more than anything in terms of development, that kind of environment. And I thought it was really interesting in terms of your experience there. And so we talked about now you've gone from grassroots and to elite boys academy football, which has its own transition, and we talked about that. Now you're going from elite boys development football to first team football. What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, it was certainly a challenge. It was certainly different, but one where I knew I had to go into that environment and try and be myself at the same time. So I'd love to claim this was my own saying as well, but I steal a lot from a lot of other coaches as well. But it was from Michael Beale, the coach who's at Rangers at the moment, who's top coach, and I've learned a lot from
Chelsea.
That's it, very good coach. And he said, once you're a developer, you're always a developer. So it's hard to come away from that, even when you go into first team football. And that always stuck with me. And I thought that I wanted to prove that you could coach, you could develop, but then also you could win games at the same time. And I was probably keen to try and prove to myself that you could do that, because I still do believe that players of any age, you can develop and improve them. They're going to be the 30-year-old pro who's been in League 2 for 15 years is going to look different to the 17-year-old lad on loan from Southampton who's in League 2 who you want to develop. So that's going to be different. But when I first went in at Woking, the budget wasn't big, so I knew we had to have a young team. I wanted a young team to get out the philosophy that I wanted to do of pressing, high tempo, quick transition, crosses in the box. So the average age at Woking was sort of 23, 24. And then when I recruited the players, I was probably lucky that they didn't have many players left over, so I could really recruit the type of players I wanted. So a lot of them, I sold them the development program that come and play for me, and you'll get what you won't get at other clubs, and that's a development program. We're going to develop you as a player and a person and push you on and push you on to higher. So for example, like Joe, for like Joe Ward, for example, we sold him in January to, probably a bit too early in January. We probably should have sold him at the end of the season, to Peterborough, and he'd been at Brighton Academy. Yeah. He'd gone on loan to a couple of clubs, and he wanted to get in, play games, improve, and he definitely had the technical ability to go and play higher. We all knew that, but no one had really got it out of him. So I sold it to him that, look, we'd do an individual development plan similar to what I'd learned at West Ham.
Yeah.
We'd work on his individual skills, go through his individual clips as well once a week. We'd sit down with that, work with him off the field, like with his psychology as well and his confidence and stuff like that. Yeah. And and not just from us, he did it himself. Don't get me wrong, he was a top player and he had a really good start to the season, and we ended up selling him. So I never would have got that player for the money that we were paying him, which wasn't a lot, if we hadn't sold him that development plan. So I felt that was the only way I could recruit some players to get them to come and play for the money that I was offering at the time. And that was hard to recruit those players, yeah.
Yeah. And just to go a step back, because I know a lot of the listeners will want to know, how did you go from youth football to first team? How did you, number one, get in front of the right people to get the interview? How does that process work?
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't know how it would work at the start, if I'm honest. I was working at West Ham, doing the 15s there, great job, but I knew that I wanted to try and test myself and try and see if I could get into first team football, whether that be as a first team coach or whether that be as a manager or whatnot. And I applied for the pro license, which really kicked it off at West Ham. And I thought, I'm the under 15s coach, I'm not going to get on the pro license. But it was the first year where they did a whole application process. Yeah. So you had to go up to St George's Park, you had to interview, you had to ask a lot of questions. They sort of did these like role play scenarios where they put you under a lot of pressure, and it was quite good to watch some big hitters in the game squirming around actually, but it was good. But and I think they were more open to who could get on the course. So they had a certain amount of managers, certain amount of ex-players who'd just come out of playing or were playing, and they had a certain amount of academy coaches in there. So I thought that gave me an opportunity to get on. But originally I thought I'll apply for the pro license. It'd probably take me 3 or 4 years to get on the course. Yeah. And then I'd be able to hopefully maybe move into first team football. But it all moved quite quick. I got on the pro license, and then from that course there, I applied for a few managers' jobs and managed to get in front of people, and I felt if I got in front of people I'd have a chance, and just so happened that the club at that time wanted to go from a part-time model into more of a full-time model, so I think that probably helped my cause as well. And I interviewed and went from there really, and then all of a sudden I was there with 5 players, no training ground, no lunch, no nothing for the players. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, what have I got myself into here? So it was quite different going from Southampton and West Ham, where you've got video analysis, facilities, great pitches, to everything, to having no facilities, no pitches, no players, no travel plans, to having to go, oh, wow. So I sort of went up in terms of working with adults and for 3 points football, to then suddenly having to do a lot more stuff as well.
And what's that interview process like? So, you know, I'm assuming that you apply, you put your CV in just like you do for a regular job. Then how you obviously get shortlisted, you come in front of, maybe is it the board? I don't know who you get in front. What is that? Can you tell everyone about that? Yeah, process?
Well, I did a presentation for the board at the time, and I knew that I'd have to present well because there were obviously some good managers who'd been in the job. So I did a squad analysis of the players that I wanted to bring in, the players that I would keep, what the strengths and weaknesses were from the previous seasons. I showed how I'd use video analysis with the clips that we'd show to the players. I did a different section on like how I'd link in with the community, because I thought that was really important. They were real community club Woking and real proud fans, and wanted to make sure I was doing my bit for the community. And also how I would link in with the academy as well, bringing the young players through, because it was a no-brainer for me with and could save you money on players, but also with the background I had, how I'd go and work with the academy players, get the youth team coach involved. And I did a full presentation with that, asked questions at the end, and didn't necessarily expect anything from it at the end, but felt like I presented well and managed to get through that way. So other ways I think have been different. I've had other interviews that have been totally different, just to sit down face-to-face chat, or not an interview at all type thing, like see what you're about from the outside and then hire you or not. So there's all different types of interview types, but I knew that when I did the presentation for that first job, I needed to be on the money and show what I could do. I did a full pre-season plan of every session, what we'd be doing in every single session leading up to the season, where the games would be, things like that. So I thought they wanted and needed that detail, and that's how I wanted to show it. I mean, I certainly delivered what I was going to do anyway in there, because I thought that was important. I couldn't go in and say one thing. I was going to bring in 30-year-olds and smash it forward type thing.
So I've been fortunate enough to see that presentation in regards to your interview process and what it was like with you being a first team manager, and I thought it was very detailed and something. It gave me an insight in regards to that process that is being delivered to get a manager's job, or the way you see it. I'm not sure if that's often done, but yeah, it gave me a real insight, which I thought was really good, and interesting as well that you had to think, do you know what, how can I use my skills? I've been developing young people for the best parts of seasons with 2 different clubs and in a grassroots environment. How can I use all those skills to benefit a first team environment, and that kind of individual learning plans that you're kind of doing for young people, or the young players in that team, your use of your resources in terms of probably contacts at academies and getting young people on loan who you think is going to help support your plan. Really, really, really good. So yeah, something to think about. What was it like there? Was it a real change? We talked about practice and we talked about the Mars bars and making sure that you kind of had that element of fun and engaging. Did you do? Listen, I'm just going to use most of my sessions, or
probably the main thing was what I spoke about before was more like the off-field bits were the challenge. I felt I was quite clear on how I was going to play, and it wasn't going to be 500 passes and total football, because it was non-league football. We were Woking, we were a bottom 4 or 5 budget, and it was tough to get the right players in there. So, but I knew we'd play to a certain extent, and I was very clear on how we'd play, what formation we'd play, and how I would coach. I was careful that I didn't overcoach, I think. And the recruitment process was very good at the start of the journey, you could say, and I got the right players in, was managed to work with them. We had an amazing start. We were 3rd in the league, I think, by October.
Did you get any players go, how can you tell me? What have you done?
Some,
what have you done? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
you're under 15s coach. What are you telling me? I'm a senior 10 years pro.
Yeah. I think you always get that challenge, and I'm sure I probably would have had under 15s players looking at me saying the same thing. What does he know? And
I'm a 6-year academy pro.
So I think when I first started coaching, even back in those grassroots days, I'd look at that as a real negative and go, God, he's all but the ex-pros have earned the right because they've had the experience, and I knew that I'd have to get the experience some other way. So I thought I've got to be good on the grass and do good sessions, and made sure I was on top of these players straight away. So one of the things I did, which was something that gained me respect, I think, on the field, was I had 10 values that I'd show the players at the start of pre-season and show quite regularly, and always put up in the office, put up around the training ground. And they were values that I held dear to myself, but I also adapted to the players. So we had 4 main ones, I think, which were hard work, ambition, belief, and respect. And I felt that a lot of the time when you were dropping one of the players, or you weren't picking them, or I guarantee they weren't doing one of those values. It wasn't just what they were doing on the pitch. Because I felt the values were so important. I had them at Southampton. I sort of adapted them and changed them from that. But I felt like I needed something to hang my hat on myself. And that was in the presentation I did to the board and to the players. So if I was going to sit down and sign a player, I'd show them that presentation with the values on there. And I felt that really helped me, like, check myself, was I living by the values in and around the group as well, but then also get those players on side with that. And I'd regularly challenge them and go, well, look, you're not doing this. Like, you need to be ambitious. You need to want to go and play in the Football League. And why can't you go and play in the Football League? Like, you can, you're good enough. And then that would challenge them. And then when they were sloppy in training, I'd go,
respect.
Hang on, you told me you wanted to go and play in the Football League, and you had ambition. You're not training like you do. So then you could nail them that way. And if there was something to refer back to, I found that's good. I'd change and adapt them slightly. I probably had a few too many. I'd probably cut it down to 8 now. So I'm always trying to think of how to change it. But I felt that was something good that hopefully got the respect before we went onto the pitch.